Good evening. Hoo, hoo, hoo. I'm a minute late, and let me tell you what, we almost didn't make it tonight. I was just sitting down in my chair to go live, and all of a sudden, I had no audio. So I was getting concerned there. I thought we was about to lose this game tonight. And I'm so sorry. And now I have to tell the world, those of you unfortunate enough to be playing, that I just lost the game. Now, y'all go ahead and call me 37 flavors of son of a bitch right there for doing that to you. But tonight we're talking about pot. We're talking about pot. We're talking about Jeff Sessions. And really, I'm gonna tag him for just a second, and then I'm gonna talk about kind of the broader issue of prohibition. So that's tonight on the Brushfire Mind. Lock in. Let's do this. All right, so here's your trigger warning. Pot. Now, I'm not a pothead. I wasn't a big pothead when I was a kid. It's just not been something I've been into. But I am a constitutional junkie, and therein lies the rub. So we've got this item in the news right now. Sessions has decided that he wants to order federal agencies to start enforcing marijuana laws, federal marijuana laws, essentially rolling back the legalization, decriminalization, however you want to phrase that, of the recreational use of marijuana in the several states where it has been legalized. And there are not a lot that have gone to recreational. Several states have legalized the use of medical marijuana, including my home state of Georgia. And I'm going to talk about that just a little bit shortly. And I'll be getting in more depth on the status of legalized medical marijuana in the state of Georgia when I start doing Georgia specific sections going forward. Those Georgia specific sessions will be separate from this Sunday Night Live show. But anyway, Sessions is essentially trying to roll back the legalization of marijuana where it has happened. Guys, that's a bad idea. It's a bad move. And as I'm sure y'all have noticed from my previous shows, I'm not Jeff Sessions' biggest fan. I think that when he recused himself, he made a huge mistake. The only caveat I will give to my position that Sessions' recusal was a massive mistake, if we give the man a little bit of credit, a little bit of 4D chess credit, and try and pretend like he was thinking ahead a few steps, the fact that Sessions recused himself over the appearance of impropriety, and just the mere appearance of impropriety. I apologize. Somebody is ringing my watch. Let me just put a stop to that. I meant to turn that off. Anyway, Sessions recused himself over the mere appearance of impropriety. Essentially, he was seen in the same room with a Russian twice, and that was enough to recuse him from the whole Russia investigation. Enough for him to feel like he needed to recuse himself. Now, let's be very clear on that. Sessions chose to recuse himself. The Democrats made a lot of noise. They demanded his recusal, but there's a reason that he had to, it came down to him choosing to recuse himself. There was no legal mechanism to cause his recusal. The only way he could have been forcibly recused, essentially, is if there were some basis by which to impeach him as the Attorney General. So, okay, you guys are sending me messages on the wrong screen here. Those of you that keep sending me Chat messages on Facebook are right here. Guys, there's a live chat. Let everybody see what you have to say. Share with us. We want to hear from you. Also, I love you, Taylor. Thanks for chiming in. I'll send you a response later. Uh, okay, okay. I just responded to one of them. I'm live now. Just tune in. How's that? Okay. So come on, come on. So Jeff Sessions had to recuse himself. It took him choosing to recuse himself because there wasn't a mechanism by which to remove him. And there was no substantial evidence to cause such a mechanism to come to fruition. Therefore, only on the coattails of the appearance of the merest impropriety. And when I say the merest impropriety, understand the lunatic fringe left in this country had the unmitigated temerity to suggest that a deep red, white, and blue bleeding boy from Alabama had met with the commies to plot the overthrow of the United States at a Heritage Foundation fundraiser. Guys, what twisted kind of shit is that? How could anybody believe that is the venue that would be chosen by probably the least likely sort of a person to be entangled in treason with the least probable co-conspirator of that particular type of red-blooded American? I mean, there's a whole lot of if wafted off of this narrative. But if we give him just a little bit of credit for forward-thinking stratagems, we can say that his recusal throws a pretty dark stain on the lack of a recusal that we've seen from Rosenstein and Mueller. So Mueller and Rosenstein were knuckles deep involved with Russia during Hillary's stint in the State Department, while Mueller was Daddy Durfee, and Rosenstein was in that mix, and they all had their hands in that cookie jar with uranium-1. So Sessions, who has seen a Russian twice, feels like he needs to recuse himself. Siri, stop. Hey, Siri, that's enough. Apparently, my iPhone keyed on something. I apologize. Anyway, God, I hate getting broken up like that. Where was I? Okay, so it was enough that Jeff Sessions twice laid eyes on a Russian. That is the merest impropriety that causes his recusal. But Mueller and Rosenstein are actively embroiled in reasonably well evidenced accusations of money laundering, illicit business practices, and yes, probably what amounts to treason with regard of the handling of American uranium products with Russia. And somehow we cannot see ourselves to suggest that constitutes conflict of interest. But I digress. All of that was basically about my opinion of Jeff Sessions, which is low. I think he's a coward. Now, on the question of the legalization of marijuana, I say legalize everything. I would be fine with prohibiting the production and acquisition and transaction of certain chemicals if it were done by a constitutional amendment. The problem with modern day prohibition, other than the simple fact that law causes crime, and that is not truer than in no other case than that of prescriptive law. And make no mistake, prohibition is prescriptive law. Law causes crime. I'm going to say that again, and I'm going to say it slow. Not because I don't think you can understand what I'm saying. I have faith that your intelligence is sufficient to process this. But the statement itself tends to shock people. And that's not the only reason I use this phrase. Law causes crime. Even what we would generally consider to be reasonable laws, the fact of the law causes crime. Now, let me defend that real quick with a little sort of hyperbole. One might argue quite correctly that it is good for a government to use its enforcement of law to prohibit the murder of a human being by another human being. There is a good case to be made that we want our government, which is armed with weapons, to use its power to prevent people from murdering other people. And I don't dispute that. I don't dispute the goodness of that fact. But the fact of the matter is that the implementation of a law which prohibits murder, because it is something that is desirable to some people, creates not only a black market, but all of the other crimes therewith associated. Now, most of your murders, most actual murder, and I'm not gonna tolerate letting this devolve into whether or not certain acts of war constitute murder. We're talking about a person chooses to end the life of another person by force. Okay? Now, most of your murders are either murders of passion, heat of the moment type of stuff, personal vengeance, vendetta type of stuff. You know, most of your murders are not actually purchased on a black market. However, when you start talking about gangland assassinations, murders of that sort, the tools are black market. So, you know, you're a gangbanger with a record. You got a couple of felony convictions on you. You have to go through a black market to acquire your weapon. Excuse me. Which means that somewhere in the mix, there's also money laundering. And where there's money laundering, there's tax evasion, etc., etc., etc. So, even though I will argue absolutely that it is wrong to murder and that the law should protect people from being murdered, the fact remains that there being a law against murder causes other crimes to occur. This is even more true when you start talking about laws which prohibit the acquisition, consumption, and utilization of a commodity. All drugs are products which are traded. Okay? Drugs are produced. Production is done by human labor, by human capital. Ergo, there is a capital value on that production. The product has a market value, which means there is a market in futures. I have no doubt that somewhere on the dark web, you can buy future stocks in heroin trade. If that's not a thing, that would surprise the absolute crap out of me. So, and I'm just going to real quick, we got 6 of you watching right now. And that's awesome. But I've only got 2 comments in the live chat. Guys, I want to hear from you. Jump in and tell me I'm wrong if you like. I love to be challenged. So jump in and call me an asshole. Jump in and tell me I'm wrong, or tell me you love me. I love you too. Um, but come on, guys, light up that chat board for me. I see Lucas and Nick, and hey, love you guys. I'm glad you're here. Uh, ooh, Real Slav Hour. Okay, that's a new one. I don't recognize you, so I hope you'll subscribe and show back up later. And let me get back to law causing crime. So, like I said, murder. You've got tangential markets. You've got black market acquisition. You've got gangland assassination. You've got black market weapons, things like that. I'm sure there's more than one Deadpool out there doing it. And I mean a Deadpool like there's a big board with names on it and people bet on who's going to die next. Not an indestructible comic book asshole that has a shitty looking face and not enough ammunition because Marvel cheaped out on his first movie. But anyway, oh no, I lost a viewer. Come back, viewer. We'll see you soon. But anyway, so when you talk about marijuana, the prohibition on marijuana, I mean, that has created an international black market, organized crime. Organized crime cannot continue to exist. Criminal organizations crumble when you legalize their product, when you legalize their trade. The same holds true for prostitution, but I'm just going to throw that out there, and we're not going to marinate on prostitution too much. Oh, Butts, I hope you're watching. I see your Facebook comment. It says you can't get the live chat on YouTube. Are you watching on your phone? Because if you're watching on your phone, there's a way to do it. You'll have to ask Mario. But hang on, guys. I'm interacting with the rest of the audience. Because this is a buddy of mine from back in the day that I'd really like to hear him talk about. So, and yeah, Nick, you made this comment a few minutes ago. Legalize everything and drug tests for government assistance. Can you imagine how much money would be saved / made in legalization? I like the idea of drug testing people before they're allowed to receive government assistance. I really do, but it's too expensive. And let me be clear. I like the idea so much that I would almost, but not quite, be willing to lose money on the cost of drug testing people for that. Okay, Chris, you say you're watching it on your computer and you don't know what you're doing. You should be able to just scroll down and see the chat below the video. I don't know. Okay, great, Chris. Okay, Chris says, laws do not cause crimes, they define them. The action is the law. The law defines the act as a crime and provides the state with the authority to punish the one who engaged in the act. It should also be noted that laws cannot control behavior, only provides the state with a method for punishing transgressors who are caught. Okay, I'm going to argue against your second point first, Chris. Laws can control behavior. Here's the thing. You make the point that laws cannot control behavior. laws cannot control morality, but making it the law that one must purchase car insurance in order to own a vehicle causes people to buy car insurance. The same is true of health insurance. Making it such that there is a punitive action for not purchasing car insurance or for health insurance also causes people to purchase health insurance. We've seen I saw a dip in people buying health insurance this year precisely because the new tax plan got rid of the Obamacare mandate, so people aren't going to be punished for not having health insurance next year, and that's a good thing. I mean, I lost some money on the deals, but I I would as soon shutter my health insurance business as see Obamacare remain for one single moment. Now, yes, people do break the law all the time. That is correct. But that does not that some people break the law is only anecdotal to the evidence that more people purchase car insurance than would in the absence of a law requiring it. Now, Obamacare is even a kind of weak example on that. But my point is not that murder is evil without a law forbidding it. My point is that the existence of a law causes other crimes to occur tangentially to it. The drug trade occurring in the way it does, if it were not for the prohibition of drug trade, then as a business it wouldn't have the levels of violence. It would not have the levels of I almost phrased that correctly. It would not involve tax evasion at the level that it does. It it would pro it works out better that way. If it's a legal business, then it's control. You've got quality control in place, all that stuff. But even more to the point, I don't even want to extol the virtues of marijuana use. I'm not going to go into all this crap about hemp and medical use and all that stuff. Even though there are some solid arguments to be made there, but constitutionally, there's no room for prohibition on any substance. And there's no stronger evidence of that than the 18th and 21st Amendments. The 18th Amendment, of course, creating the prohibition on alcohol, which gave us, gang wars. It gave us NASCAR. That's a good thing. It gave us the idea and the motif and the aesthetic of the speakeasy. And just one brief tangent to extol the virtues of human ingenuity. In all fairness, the 18th Amendment and prohibition being timed such with the introduction of the Thompson M1A1, more commonly referred to as the Chicago typewriter or Tommy gun, being a 45 ACP fully automatic machine gun, which was refused as a suggested replacement for the Doughboys M14 rifles of the era, was taken up by criminal gangs. And in response, the police, instead of replacing the service revolvers, which could not shoot through the solid steel doors of Ford's cars at the time, created the .357 Magnum, replacing the ammunition without having to replace the service revolver. And that is near and dear to my heart, because my daily is a .357, and I love her. She is the fifth most beautiful woman in my life. Now, that said, okay, Christopher. Chris says illicit drugs will destroy your life, so if I catch you using them, I'm going to throw you in prison and destroy your life. Now, I'm about to tell you a funny story. I don't do drugs. Frankly, I don't even drink very often. It's not that I don't drink. I like my nice expensive scotch and my expensive bourbon and my craft beers. But I'm not one to crack a Budweiser just so that I have a beer going down my throat. This is not my game. However, I was in Washington State recently, and I swear, just for the sheer novelty of it, I went with someone close and actually went to one of the pot stores because I had to see it. I had to see a pot store. So I went into the pot store with someone close, and I was deeply amused. I mean, it was actually a pretty nice store. It wasn't quite an Apple store. Frankly, it was a step down from the tobacco shops that I'm accustomed to going into. I mean, some of you guys have been in these places. There are these fantastic joints, cigar shops. You go in, and it's really just a bunch of old rich dudes sitting around watching Fox News, smoking cigars, and basically taking a nap instead of doing any real work because they've worked their asses off to get rich and fat and old. And I love them. Now, at the pot store, where it was legal for me to purchase and consume marijuana recreationally, I bought a pot cookie. Bought one cookie for $3. Well, sort of. I bought two cookies for $3, but I only ate one of them and I gave the other one away. But anyway, I bought my pot cookie. I went home. I ate my pot cookie. 45 minutes later, I got sleepy for a few minutes. And then I said to myself, maybe the 350-pound man needs more than one cookie. But I'm just not going back there. Real Slav hours, they were close enough. But I'm not going to name names on that because, I mean, OPSEC. I'll tell you my dirty secrets, but they're not all mine to share, okay? However, let me say this about the one pot cookie I ate, which had no effect on my big fat ass because, well, big fat ass. The pot cookie I had was dark chocolate and roasted macadamia nut. And frankly, if somebody had laid a plate of them out on the buffet line and not told me what the deal was, I might have been in trouble because it was damn delicious and it was about that big. I might have been just chopping them down if I hadn't known better. But that was my experience there. Now, let me scroll back up on laws do not cause crimes, they define them. Sort of. So crime, by definition, when you sit down in the chair at law school on day one as a freshy man, the first lesson is crime is harm. When you enter a courtroom to argue property damage, you're normally not entering criminal proceedings at the small level. You know, somebody ran over your fence. You're not going in probably unless there was an arrest made and a DUI or something like that. You're going in to argue that this person, whether or not they meant to cause you harm, has caused you to be less whole. And so they are responsible now to make you whole. They ran over your fence. It is their responsibility to pay for that fence. But the thing about that is that in and of itself is not crime. When you go to argue crime, you have to show harm. Crime is committed against a victim. Now, that victim may be a big corporation or something. You know, there's all that argument about whether or not corporations are people. Let's just go ahead and, for the sake of this conversation, assume they are. And I would be happy to argue I'd be happy to argue that position, but let's just keep it as an assumption for this conversation so we can argue the rest of it. A crime is committed against someone, and what you must prove when you go to prove crime is that harm was done. It was done for a reason, intent, usually, forgetting about crimes like what Hillary Clinton did. There, in the case of Clinton's crimes, there is a clear victim, but intent is explicitly excluded from the statute. Intent is not a part of the conversation there. So, when you go to argue crime, you have to argue harm. In suicide, one can argue that the victim is the perpetrator, and that the harm is clear and present, and that argument can hold, of course, when you're arguing about drug use. There is a reasonable argument to be made that the use of drugs causes harm to a person, and I don't oppose that argument personally. I'm a smoker. I drink a little bit. I like my coffee, and I understand the risks that come with that. I'm a big fat dude. I mean, hell, last time Butch saw me, last time you saw me, Christopher, I was about 150 pounds, well, 100 pounds lighter than I am now. But, I don't run 50, 60 miles a week or whatever madness it was in Hawaii anymore. Anyway, so when you argue crime, you argue harm. Harm makes a person less whole. Now, that could be they lost an arm. Okay, yes, Christopher, I'm actually with you 100% on that. I'll be right back to that point. Yes, I will absolutely argue that first sentence, but beyond that, it's not a proper place of a state to tell individuals what they may or may not do with their own body. More importantly, okay, I'm glad you... Damn, Chris, you need to get in the live chat over here. Do I need to call you on the phone and explain how to operate a computer? I mean, I know you're old, sweetheart, but we'll get you there. We'll get you there. I'd love to have you just come on the show sometime. Anyway, Chris makes this point about criminal acts committed while under the influence of illicit drugs ought to be treated as if it was committed with intent and awareness. Yes. You know what? I make the same argument on abortion, Christopher. There was a time to make a choice. And once you've made that choice, you are committed to the consequences of that decision. If you choose to drink until you are drunk, then when you choose after that to drive, to operate a motor vehicle, sorry, I'm about to... Excuse me. This is live, so I can't jump cut that shit out. If you choose to operate a motor vehicle, here's the thing. You made the choice to do the drinking. One can make the argument that your decision-making, your choice-making capacity was hindered, and therefore you were not capable of making the correct choice not to drive the vehicle under the influence. However, the fact of the matter remains that you made the choice to enter that altered state. I say the same. I would make the same argument with any mind-altering chemical. Anything that's going to slow you down or alter your perception, alter your decision-making, any of that, no. Abortion, life of the mother aside, you made the choice to engage in activity which had a known consequence. You accepted risk up front. Thank you for that. Bless you, Nick. Appreciate you, brother. You made the choice up front to accept that risk. And once those consequences are upon you, you own them. You made your choice. People who talk about pro-choice, no, you're pro-baby murder. That's what you are. If you were pro-choice, then you would have a conversation about the choices that are made leading up to that risk. I did not mean to get off on that tangent, but I haven't talked to Christopher in far too long, and that's one thing that I know he and I agree on deeply, deeply. So how much time do I have left? Damn, I've been running my mouth for 36 minutes. Well, 35 minutes. I was 1 minute late because we had the sound thing. But anyway, so in the next 14 minutes, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into the constitutional situation. So, under the Constitution of the United States of America, there is no explicit expressed authority to prohibit particular behavior. In fact, the absence of that expressed authority, according to the 10th Amendment, is to be construed as an explicit omission of that authority from the government, from the federal government, and a release of that authority, or rather a retention of that authority, to the states and the people beneath them. Okay, so authority belongs to the people. It is delegated from the people to the state, and then from the state, if it was delegated to the federal government by the Constitution or by an amendment thereto, that authority may belong to the federal government. That is why there was an 18th Amendment. The federal government decided that it wanted a dry country, and the law did not permit it to make that. Boom, we've got Christopher. Yes! Happy dance. There's your happy dance. Okay. And by the way, Christopher, you'd be proud. These this row of theater chairs that are motorized recliners. My baby brother found these for me in a thrift shop for $40, and they're fucking brilliant. Anyway, so the constitutional authority to prohibit the consumption, trade, production, or distribution of any substance whatsoever does not exist. It is not constitutionally lawful for the federal government to issue controls on the production and sale of pharmaceutical grade opioids. That is constitutionally prohibited. I am not arguing that there should not be controls on substances of that sort. I am, however, arguing that the authority to make those controls is explicitly denied from the federal government by the 10th Amendment. When the federal government decided they wanted a dry country, that they wanted to teetotal us and there would be no more whiskey and beer, there was a constitutional amendment, the 18th Amendment, and the repeal of prohibition, which I might add was done because prohibition proved to be an enormous disaster, precisely for the reasons I laid out earlier. The existence of prohibition created incentivized black markets, which created crime. Tangential to the black markets, you have a black market. A black market is under threat by the law, and whether they're right or wrong, the response that's going to be made to the threat by the law to the safety and security of the black market is going to be attempts to secure and defend that black market because people have chosen to make their living there. Good, bad, right, or wrong, that's what the facts of the matter are. And therefore, such a prohibition is going to result in violence. It's going to result in money laundering, smuggling. Those are all crimes in and of themselves. But those crimes are given a marketplace of exchange by the prohibition law. And it made NASCAR. I mentioned that earlier, Real Slav. It made NASCAR. NASCAR, for those of you who don't know, is the result of rum runners. Well, whiskey runners, they're moonshine runners, especially in the Appalachians and in the South in the United States. People building faster and faster and faster cars so they can outrun the cops and cut down on shipping time to increase production quantity and distribution expansion, because there's only two ways to make a profit: distribution and markup. You can either sell quality or quantity. Those are your options. you can do both, but it's only one of the it's only one or the other or both of those two. So there's no room under the law, under the Constitution, for the prohibition of substances. How do we get away with it then? How did they manage it? They broke out the Commerce Clause, which says that the federal government is to keep regular trade between the states. Now that's the phrasing there is very important. Watch out for your guns, guys. You hear the lefties talk about, well, what they really meant when they wrote this whole thing about the security of a free people, blah 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 blah, the militia, blah 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 blah. No. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Period. The security of a free people, all that, none of that suggests that guns were intended only for the military. It says the people. Well, the Commerce Clause says that the federal government shall make regular trade between the states. It's not like they just wrote the sentence and walked away from it, guys. There are discussions about it in the Federalist Papers. There are discussions about it in the Anti-Federalist Papers. There are personal letters. There are essays. They discussed it. The information is there. And the language of the time is clear. A problem that had persisted between the colonies was the use of tariffs between certain colonies to restrict trade from colony to another colony. Yep, that's right. Tyrannical deer. That's exactly right, Christopher. Because, well, tyrants make bad jerky. Look at Castro. He was dried out for decades before he finally skipped off, and he taught us an important lesson. Totalitarian dictatorship is good for the heart. But to keep trade regular between states, the federal government was essentially expected to come in as kind of a, not an arbiter, an arbiter, in arbitration between states with trade disputes. So if Georgia wanted to ship cotton to Mississippi, Alabama shouldn't be allowed to put a tariff to prevent Georgia from shipping cotton to Mississippi so that Alabama can trade into Mississippi and cut off somebody on the other side. And I'm not even going to argue whether or not that's right or wrong. I mean, there's a certain argument to be made for for state sovereignty and allowing an individual state to tariff other states. But the point is that what was not intended by that was for the federal government to create restrictions on trade between states. It was explicitly made clear that the whole point of the Commerce Clause was to prevent states from restricting trade between one another, or more importantly, between other states. It'd probably be okay if Alabama decided they didn't want to buy any cotton from Georgia, but if they got in the way of Georgia trading with Mississippi, that could be a problem. So one of the reasons that we decided not to put up with that happening is because we didn't want states going to war over minor trade disputes all the time. Because, good God, can you imagine if the American Revolution suddenly looked like the Phantom Menace? Whew. I don't need no viceroys in my Dixie land. Let me tell you what. So, but some slick silver-tongued lawyers and some judicial activist judges have decided that they can use the Commerce Clause to regulate drug use. The argument, of course, being that drug trade is interstate trade, that drugs are going to go from one state to the next. Chris, this is not something you will hear me say often. I am not familiar with that case, and I don't have time to look it up right now, so I'll have to get back to you. I'll have to get back to you on Wickard versus Filburn. I'll read up on that before I revisit this argument. Anyway, the argument, of course, for the authority of the federal government to create a prohibition on chemicals is the Commerce Clause. And the way they argue it is that drugs are traded across state lines, which is a true statement. It is true that some drugs are, in fact, traded across state lines. But let me ask you this. If the argument for the regulation and prohibition of individual chemicals is the nature of their trade across state lines, then how is it possible for a federal statute to criminalize even the production and use of methamphetamine, of crystal meth, of cocaine? If the argument is based entirely on the Commerce Clause, then why shouldn't I be able to grow poppy seeds in my backyard and produce opium for personal use in the house? I'm not even saying I want to, but I mean, how do we allow ourselves to have laws which are criminal themselves? The laws themselves are criminal. The laws themselves are unconstitutional. There's no authority for that. So, you know what? I think I've just about run that out. I think I'm starting to talk in circles and beat that horse to death. I'm going to sit here and stare at you for a minute, see if anybody's got anything to add. Let me see what you got. See, okay, yeah, that's what I'm getting at. If that is the intent of the Commerce Clause to regulate things that move over state boundaries, then precisely it's carte blanche. It's a blank check for the federal government to regulate literally everything under an interpretation that allows for the prohibition of substances. Now, that to me sounds like a federal government that has got too much authority, that has an unreasonable amount of authority. Yes. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do with the last couple of minutes before I sign off tonight, because Chris is in the audience watching tonight, and Chris, I'm sorry, Chris, but Mario didn't show up tonight. I'll have to chastise him, and I don't know, maybe I'll threaten his children or something, because I'd really love to get you two talking back and forth again. But, you know, alhamdulillah. Oh. No, well, I assumed that Wickard v. Filburn was an establishing. I assumed you mentioned it because it was an establishing SCOTUS case, but I'm not familiar with the particulars of it. Damn, I just lost my train of thought. Thanks, real Slav. You derailed what I was about to say. Oh, yeah. So Chris is in the audience, and I'm just going to talk straight at you for a minute, brother. I know that you weren't the biggest Trump guy from the get-go. I think you were a Cruz guy in the primary. correct me if I'm wrong. Um, I'm not I'm not outing you on anything here because I know I've seen you talk about stuff on Facebook and everything. But despite the distaste I know that you have for some of his personal conduct, are are you happy with what we're getting out of the man so far? Um, Let me tell you what I love. Let me get ready. Let me do this right. Let me tell you what it is, and relating to this conversation, and this goes back to my dislike of AG Sessions as well. The thing that I have loved seeing out of the Donald is, quite frankly, his just hack and slash Carson, then Carly, then Cruz. See, I'd had a hard time voting for Carly except against Hillary. Um, Maybe it makes me a terrible person, but I I still have a hard time with the idea of a woman for president. I do, and I can talk about my reasons for that, but um, the results are defensible. The methods less so. Fair, fair, but I love that he has just absolutely gone on a hack and slash on regulations. He's gotten a lot of crap out of the media for the tweets and everything, and I I was going to talk about the big button tweet because I mean let's face it, that's the best one he's done. That's the best one out of him so far. I love that the Donald is shouting at North Korea and saying, "Come at me, bro, come at me," because frankly that's how we won the Cold War. Ronald Reagan said, "Come at me, son, come at me." Um, and what did they say about Ronald Reagan when he said, "Come at me"? I am the Dark Lord. That is correct, Christopher. You'll have to look for my poetry on another channel, though, brother. The Brushfire mind is all about liberty. Maybe I'll throw you a little something later, but yeah, I mean, Ronald Reagan said, "Come at me, bro." He called Russia the evil empire. And he handled that, and we won the Cold War. Um, the big button tweet was not just pretty funny; it was correct. It was the right answer. I mean, there was so much there. He made a penis joke to a man who is part of a culture where emasculation is absolutely damning. Um, he made reference to the power of the U.S. arsenal against versus the efficacy, not even the potency, but the functionality of the North Korean arsenal. And Chris, I've talked about this several times on the show before. Donald Trump cannot. It is impossible for Donald Trump to start a war with North Korea. We have not been at war with North Korea since 1952. I agree completely there. Reagan was classier than Donald Trump. I'll give you that. But Trump's a hell of a lot classier than Obama, so I think that's a step up. Oh, yes, I made that statement and I'm willing to defend it. But I think we've spent the hour, and now I'm just spinning on the Donald here. So I, I actually bought this hat to play a character on some comedy skits that we're going to do on this show. So look forward to that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just gonna call it a night right there. Chris, I hope you come back. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I need all the subscribers I can get To the rest of you guys who have already subscribed, thank you so much for your patronage. As some of you have noticed, we hit the 100 mark. And I know that's 100 is not a lot of subscribers, but it is an important milestone. It means that we now have an official channel branding. We are no longer youtube.com at string of random syllables. We are now youtube.com/c/the Brushfire Mind. So that's where we are now. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for engaging us in the comments section. We're here every Sunday night at 2000 Eastern Standard Time. That's 8 p.m. East Coast Standard Time. There's usually more of us on the couch than this, but, you know, we got to put gas in their cars and all that good stuff. Until next week, I love you. Thanks for coming out. I'll see you then. And remember, until then, if you build a man a fire, you'll keep him warm for the evening. But if you set a man on fire, he'll be warm for the rest of his life. Good night.